Astra Travelers, and welcome to another episode of Tales of Teyvat, a Genshin lore podcast. Last week, we discussed the god who knows everything, Venti.
This week, we'll be discussing the darling of Inazuma, the Canadian Aether, Kaedehara Kazuha.
Just a reminder for everyone to check out our website, talesofteyvat.com, where you can fill your eye holes with all kinds of wonderful pictures and videos, etc.
Our site also includes links to our past seasons and special episodes, artist spotlights from the community for every episode, wallpapers to download, and some of our favorite Genshin merch.
Finally, feel free to email us at talesofteyvatpod@gmail.com to let us know what you think of this week's episode and what topics you want to see in the future. But for now, back to poor sad boy Kazuha. Like, he's not emo boy Zhao, but he's sad. He doesn't show it, but he's sad.
He's very, even keeled. Like, he's almost like he's his own Xanax.
He's his own Xanax.
That's what the wind does to you.
Yeah. He's just like, chill.
Chill as shit. I mean, there's a lot of reason for that, and it comes from the inspiration that is Kazuha. When you look kind of to, I don't know who first kind of connected the dots, but people realize that, when he's bursting and he's like, oh god, what is the saying? Bees, what does he say when he bursts his...
Oh, what does he say?
It's something beautiful.
Is it better than my internal reaction was,
No, that's the American Aether. This is Canadian Aether.
Well, I know when he does his skill, he says something about the wind.
Yes.
Of course he does. He has 3 burst lines. Clouds hide, the birds call.
Mm-hmm.
As one with wind and cloud.
Yes.
And fallen leaves adorn my night.
Yes. So all of those are lines from a very specific Japanese poet.
Oh, shit.
Oh, really?
Oh, really?
Yes.
Which poet?
Manyoshu. I'm butchering the shit out of it, but he's from the Nara period of Japan and did a lot of he's part of classical poetry. And he is very prominent in the waka style, specifically the tanka, which, you know how haikus are the 5-7-5. Well, a tanka is 5-7-5-7-7. And everything that Kazuha says in his bursts are lines from his anthology called The Collection of 10,000 Leaves. And even Kazuha's name means a myriad of leaves, while Kaedehara means maple grove. So everything that's inspired this character is absolutely Manyoshu, which is really interesting because you gotta think poetry in Japanese culture is it's transcendent. It captures history, it captures literature, it captures political intrigue. It does a lot of things as we would look at our literature of the day, which would, instead of poetry, we're looking more toward
fan fiction.
Yes, fan fiction. But kind of classics when we think of books from Mark Twain. But when we look at literature that founded or surrounds American culture, at least North American culture, we think of novelists. When in Japan, when you think of literature and you look at classical literature, you're looking at a lot of poetry. And he is kind of one of the staples, one of the most notable poets of classical Japanese waka style. And waka contains a lot of different styles, but it's a lot of the symbols of, it can go 5-7-5-7, 5-7-5-7-7-7. It has a lot of different combinations.
Does it include the Fozzie Bear style? Because that's what I think of when I think of waka.
Waka.
I mean, I don't know.
I thought of the Final Fantasy X character.
But what's even more interesting is that even though Manyoshu inspired a lot of the design and the history, well, not the history, but the vibe of Kazuha, he actually has a lot more relation to a poet called the Wandering Poet named Matsui Bashu, who is legitimately, he was born into a samurai family. You can see where this parallels.
Mm-hmm.
And at the age of 22, he was like, fuck it, I'm going to wander. I'm going to write poetry. And he was actually a very famous poet of kind of the school that came up with haikus. And when Kazuha is practicing poetry, he's only using the haiku form. He's not using tanka, he's using haiku, which is the 5-7-5. It's fascinating. Very, very fascinating how, even though he's like this badass swordsman, which every time I see Kazuha, I think of the House of Flying Daggers, because of course I do. Like, it's a masterpiece, and so is he. But a lot of the times, like, it's very interesting of the poetry side or the literature side that they looked at Japanese culture to create Kazuha instead of like going full Ronin with him. Like, sure, he's from a family of swordsmiths, but he's a poet.
It's funny too that you bring up the whole wandering poet too, because in his like storyline about how he got his vision, they say something like, "Oh, so is the plight of the wanderer." And I just think it's funny that they keep using the word wanderer to talk about him, and then eventually we call Scaramouche the wanderer. And it's interesting to me based on how their stories are intertwined, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But I do think we're jumping a little far ahead into Kazuha. We just like deep dived on his origin story, I think, but in a weird way.
I mean, it's inspiration story, if anything.
Absolutely. So I want to back up into exactly who Kazuha is and when we meet him in the game. So like Al mentioned, Kazuha is a wandering samurai. He's from Inazuma, and he's amazing at poetry.
And at everything, really.
He's like, that boy can't do anything wrong.
Really can't, though. Really can't.
I was going to say, out of any character in this game that you'd say that about, it definitely would be him. Least likely to fuck anything up.
He serves a lot of main character energy.
Yeah, for a character that's like not the main character. He's not even like...
I mean, at this point, he kind of is, though.
We haven't seen him in quite some time right now, since last summer.
Yeah, I'm wondering when he's going to show up in Fontaine.
Yeah, I do feel like he has to. But we first meet Kazuha in Leeway, despite him being an Inazuman and an Inazuma character, which is always fun because Leeway was such a weird place for like characters, because like you have Child who's from Shiznaya, but he's marked under like online and wherever you look at characters where they're from, he's a Leeway character. And for a little bit, Kazuha was also listed as a Leeway character. And I think at the end of the Inazuman Archon line, they pull him over to Inazuma. So Leeway really just wanted to fuck with things.
Yeah, now that he's no longer a criminal, a wanted criminal.
Yeah. They're like, you can belong here again.
So let's go into that. Why is Kazuha wanted in Inazuma? So just a quick recap for travelers. Kazuha is wanted in Inazuma, and he escaped, so to say, Inazuma, and he joined the crew of the Crux that Beto leads. But why did he have to leave Inazuma in the first place?
He had to leave because he took the dying vision of his quote unquote friend, took his vision that after he was executed, so they couldn't put it on the omnipresent god. So, but you need to know that little bit of that story of why that would even have happened.
Right. Which, another quick recap for Inazuma, because I know we're in Fontaine right now, and it's been a while. In Inazuma, they did have a vision hunt decree. They were collecting everyone's visions, and that's kind of the main storyline of Inazuma, and they had the omnipresent god statue there where they were putting everyone's visions. So Kazuha kind of fucked with them when he was like, meh, that's mine.
So the story of Kazuha's friend who lost this vision, his name is Tomo. It's not really, but it's what the fandom calls him because it means friend in Japanese. So anytime we talk about Tomo, we're not talking about Tomo and saying it wrong. We're actually talking about this character, Tomo. Kazuha tells the traveler actually the story as to why he has this dead vision with him when we first meet him. And the story is beautiful and tragic. So he has his friend, and it's like, obviously like everything else in Genshin, it's a beautiful cutscene. We'll link to it. It's gorgeous. Kazuha's friend Tomo was kind of asking him questions like, what is all this stuff about the Musu no Hutachi, which is the divine punishment that the Raiden Shogun gives? It's this crazy sword. I can't think of what a word would be.
Well, it's a kitty sword too.
Yeah, it's
like
her titty
a crazy
sword
attack.
Yeah, thank you.
Like an unstoppable slash.
Yes.
Horrifying.
Yeah. And it, nobody is able to survive this. Like, it's kind of like when you have divine punishment, this is it. You're done. So Tomo is kind of like, there's got to be somebody who can beat this. And he became a bit of obsessed with it. So as time goes on and like, Kazuha's, he's a wanderer. So he's, out and about. He hears that Tomo actually requested a duel with the Vision hunters. So he gets into this duel, and the end point of it is if you lose this duel, it's end of story for you. You're getting divine punishment, but this is what he's wanted. He wants to go up against it because he thinks he can stop it and he can be like, look, this isn't the ultimate. Unfortunately, he was wide-eyed and wrong. So as Kazuha was like, running up the stairs, slow motion, trying to get there, he falls and his blade is severed and his vision is detached. And as this is all happening, Kazuha is distraught, grabs the dying vision and just runs. Now, everybody there is like, nobody. We need this to put into the omnipresent God. But he's like, you're not taking this away. And he runs and he needs to escape Inazuma. And that's how he ends up meeting up with Beto and Ritao and joining the ship, the Alcor, in the whole with the crux and stuff. But the beautiful part about Tomo too is like you can tell by the story, just in the cutscene alone, that Tomo is not just his friend. It is so much more than that. It is his boyfriend. I don't care what anybody says. That is his boyfriend. They love each other, and it's just sad because he loses his boyfriend at this time.
Yeah.
Later on in the Inazuma story, the whole thing kind of comes to an end, and the Raiden Shogun is actually coming out to sweetly do them onto us. And Kazuha was there, and he's like, no, this isn't gonna happen. And he jumps up, and his other vision starts to turn colors and starts to reactivate. And now he has his vision and his friend's vision, and he goes and he stops the Muso no Hitachi. So, and he saves our lives, and everybody's like, whoa.
Including Kazuha. He's like, wait, what does that mean?
like, oh shit, this works. So at the end of this whole story, the vision then dies again. He grabs it. At the end of the story, when everything's kind of resolved, he goes to his friend's grave. And at the grave, he has the severed sword, and he puts the vision there. So after you finish the Inazuma storyline, you can actually go there and see the vision. It's not there beforehand. But the other cute part about it is this white kitten is there too. You see that he loved this cat.
Yeah, because Tomo had a cat.
Yeah, you see this beautiful cat in this cutscene, and it's so cute, and he sits there all the time.
It's sad. It's so sad.
He's waiting for him.
It's a beautiful story. It makes me sad.
And just to backtrack too to like the whole fight thing, like with the Raiden Shogun with Tomo, Kazuha also, like when he's running up to like try to save Tomo, like he already knows that he's kind of fucked because he broke in. Like, is it a palace technically?
Yeah. It's like a castle.
Like he broke in like to where this whole thing was happening. He like broke in and already was like, well, I'm gonna die for my boyfriend today. And so I think it's even like a double whammy when he gets up there. And I think they even say something like Kazuha, who's always been so good at keeping his cool, just could not contain himself in that moment.
Wait, how could he?
So you also mentioned, Tiff, that he runs away after snatching the vision quick. And we actually found out, I believe, during the 2022 summer event, or during his character story, or during the Iridori Festival. I don't know which one. During a special event, we found out that the Kamisato clan actually helped Kazuha escape Inazuma as well and kind of connected him with Beto, which was super interesting.
Right.
And another quick refresher with Inazuma, because I feel like we haven't talked about Inazuma in a while, but there's the Tri-Commission in Inazuma, and Kazuha's family, which was the Kaedehara clan, they used to be led by the Kamisatos, who were one of the three leaders of Inazuma. So the Kamisatos, aka Ayato and Ayaka, because everyone else is dead, felt like they had to do something to protect Kazuha, who is also a friend of theirs. Listen, there's a lot of dead people in Inazuma.
Look, when you're dealing with the Raiden Shogun, fucking people are gonna fly.
I know, isn't that kind of like insane? Like I feel like she owes a lot of like retribution back to these people.
Absolutely, because like the puppet that is the Raiden Shogun, it reminds me of, oh god, Little Robert. I'm gonna go back to Game of Thrones. I'm sorry, everyone, but like the little fucking shit who is now the Lord of the Aaron or whatever, Lord Robert Aaron or Rob Aaron or whatever. And he's like this little like 5-year-old who's still sucking on his mom's titty. And he's like, I want to see the little man fly. It feels kind of like that, of like, you pissed me off. I want to kill you. Step through the fucking giant hole in this castle and fall to your death.
Oh my god. I've never watched Game of Thrones. I'm shook.
Yeah, it's fucked up. Peter Dinklage was amazing in that. Anyway, no, it feels like the Raiden, didn't throw a tantrum, but like, you do not compute. I am gonna kill you.
I mean, yeah, it definitely feels like A should like program the puppet to like go on an apology tour. Just like, I'm so sorry I killed all these people. I ruined your family's lives.
My bad.
These poor orphans. These orphans are now orphans of orphans.
Yeah.
Because even though she directly ruined Kazuha's relationship, by ending it.
Mhm.
She didn't directly cause problems with his family, but she is the reason for it, which we'll get into in a little bit. Dun, dun, dun.
It's funny you mentioned like the whole Kazuha maybe not necessarily forgiving the Raiden Shogun thing. He says that he actually finds like, while he's upset about it, he finds the justice that was given to Tomo right. Like, not the justice, the punishment that was given to Tomo right and just. Like, it was an agreement. He, while it makes him sad, understands it and thinks that it was done the way it should have been. Kazuha has some other things that he's not necessarily happy with. And during the yokai event that happens in Inazuma, we like team up. It's like a ghost hunting event at first that turns into like an actual issue. And there's 3 parts of the quest, and you can like partner up with different people. And if you partner up with Kazuha at the one point, you actually run into the Raiden Shogun at the end with him. And Kazuha's like, I'm gonna go away. I don't want like any unnecessary unpleasantries. And for me, it was hard to tell whether or not he was like, I don't want to deal with her, she's a bitch, or if it was, I don't need her apologizing to me tenfold. Like, I just need to like get out of here. So his mindset on the situation is very interesting too, and maybe that's the poet in him. I don't know. Maybe that's the wind, or maybe that's all the weed he smokes. I don't know.
I wonder, he doesn't necessarily know that that's a puppet, right?
I don't think anyone in Inazuma knows except for us.
Right.
He has an interesting little interaction with Kujo-Sara as well, because he hates everybody that follows the Raiden Shogun. Like, it's not just the Raiden Shogun. Like, he was against it all. And I think it's in the Irodori festival. They have kind of like a, hey, well, we don't have to talk about that, but like, okay, we're good. And they just kind of like move on.
Right, because Kujo-Sara was part of the group that like confiscated all of the Kaedehara belongings when their family fell apart and Kazuha disappeared. So they're like,
once he was a wanted man, they're like, I guess we gotta take this guy's stuff.
Yeah, and so they kind of, in the Irodori festival, we need to get to some of it. And we have to go up there, and Kazuha's kind of like, yeah, hi. So he like hides his hand over his eyes. He's like,
Remember me.
But so what happens to Kazuha after, he gets the help of Ayato and Ayaka, the golden siblings of this game, and he meets Beidou. He ends up wandering around with them, basically.
Yeah, he joins the ship's crew. He doesn't talk much, which doesn't surprise anybody. He talks to her a lot, but
she makes him talk to her.
Yeah.
Yeah, he becomes a passenger of the Crux and just enjoys sort of wandering on, many a boat ride. And we actually meet Kazuha when he and Beidou are organizing a contest, and the winner of the contest is to receive the dead vision to see if anyone can activate it.
I like that they're holding like an albedo level science experiment in Leeway, and they didn't invite him. I'm offended.
Maybe he was invited. He just didn't know because he was like in his cave.
Stop it. Not the cave.
I don't think he has a mailbox in his cave, does he?
I don't think anyone would want to deliver mail there. No one is going up there to deliver.
I would, just for him. But anyway, and at this point in the game, we've never heard of a dead vision unless you've like deep dived into Mona's story, I believe.
Yes, because Mona's vision was a gift that her teacher gave to her, the old hag, as a teaching aid. And it was just, a dead vision that she received, and then it activated with her. So that's really, I think, the only place before this quest where we've even really heard of that.
Yeah, and how many people actually read that far in the Mona storyline at this point in the game too? His leeway was released pretty quickly, from what I understand.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really the first time probably 95% of travelers have seen a dead vision. What were your first takes on that when you saw it? Did you think you'd be able to revive it? Because I totally thought we could do it, because we can do anything in this game.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's why it made the moment when it activates on Kazuha so much more impactful and meaningful, that it was the ghost of his lover was sort of with him in that moment.
Mhm.
And it was so unexpected, because I really thought that it would be Traveler that activated it. And you kind of forget about it.
Yeah.
And then we don't get to that moment until, the end of Inazuma. So everyone had sort of forgotten about this dead vision that he was carrying around with him by then. And so when it suddenly lights up, it's oh shit.
Kazuha himself was pretty shocked that Traveler wasn't able to activate it. Just being that we already had the power of all of the elements, it was kind of well, if anybody's going to be able to do it, it would be you. And nothing happened.
Yeah, and he looks so sad too. I think he was really kind of heartbroken of oh, I thought, it was sort of it made it to where Tomo's death was real.
Yeah.
Look, we just haven't finished our Avatar story.
It's true.
We haven't gone to all the nations yet. We haven't mastered every element yet. We're only on Hydro now. We've got 2 more to go, and then we can revivify.
One of the things that could also be, if you think of visions being selected for the person for a specific reason, I mean, to go back to what B said, it reactivated itself, and we were all kind of well, look at that. We also hear a line repeated from Tomo that is, there will always be those who dare to brave the lightning's flow. So in that moment, he was going up against the Raiden Shogun. So it was he needed that extra oomph of the electro power to kind of, get against her. And it kind of knew that. And I almost feel that's kind of the reason why it didn't at that point. I think if we had tried it another time, I feel it may have, once we got really involved with the Vision Hunter Cree and trying to get a little bit more, we started hating her, I guess, and kind of going up against her.
Yeah.
There is a possibility, but it's still great that it worked for Kazuha.
Right. And I think it's so I don't know the right word. I know the word, I can't think of the right word, but Kazuha's just such a strong character after that to instead be oh, let me hold on to this and use it whenever I need, and hope for the best. He's no, Tomo finally got to win against this, and now I'm going to let even his powers rest.
Yeah.
It's so fucking sad.
It's so beautiful. It's he gave it back to him. This is something you've been missing, because he's obviously known where he is buried the whole time. He gets there real quick. So he thought I mean, I think also at that point he didn't want somebody just coming up and taking it and sticking it into the omnipresent god, once that was over.
And what's really interesting was that when it activates, it's it really is activating in his whole body. It's not just the talisman itself that lights up, because his eyes actually start crackling with electricity when the vision activates.
When Kazuha is using his animal powers, he doesn't have wind swirls in his eyes, so it really almost seems the spirit of Tomo took over. Which in Kazuha's storyline, we know that swords can kind of take over a human.
Oh my god. Yo, that whole thing, that whole storyline. One, it's always fun to learn about swordsmanship and sword crafting, because I'm a fucking weird nerd. But it is just the perfect parallel for the third movie of Inuyasha.
It is. Al's 100% right.
It is so good. And also, I do have that sword specifically on Kazuha, but now I can change it because I have his best in slot, or one of the best in slots. I found something amazing, Feeny, that I think you would like. If we want to go into that now, we can also wait a bit.
No, I want to go into a storyline, but I do just want to give one quick prelude before we do, actually. For travelers who don't know, we've kind of hinted at it. Kazuha comes from the Kaedehara clan, which again was under the Kamisatos. The Kaedehara clan was very well known known for their not swordsmanship, but like their blade work. So making the swords.
Sword metallurgy? No, swordsmithing. That's the word.
Like Wagner. But back in the heyday of Inazuma, pre-Vision Hunt degree, pre-everything crazy, blades work was very, very popular. And there were like several different families that were known for blades work. Kazuha's family was one of them. And starting with his grandfather, there started to be a decline in the Kadeharas. And at one point, Kazuha's own father tells him, if there is something more in your heart that you want to follow, like do that, because this is a dying cause. So this character story, which was not released with him, which is weird. There's only 3 characters that didn't get a story released at the same time as them, which another one of them is Wanderer, just saying, more parallels between the two of them. But when we do eventually get this character story, we actually dive a little bit more into the blade work, which we are going to talk about now.
Yes, the Kaedehara family was a part of the Ishin art, which was one of the 5 schools of the Raiden Shogun, which was about all the things that had kind of happened to start the decline was about 100 years ago, when it actually just started to go, burr, burr. It was with his great-grandfather. There were some bad vibes. Bad vibes! But the Raiden Gokuden, so just to give a little idea of the Raiden Gokuden, it was 5 schools of blade work, and then within each one, there's only actually 2 that are kind of still alive right now. The Ishin art, which is Kazuha, only because he is technically still alive, but he's really the only one doing anything with it. Mm-hmm. The other one is the Aminoma art, is really the one that's still thriving. That's the big one that's still kind of going and stuff like that. And basically, these people were taught by Raiden Shogun. So these are how she's made things and stuff like that. And there was a time when she requested some blades to be made and for these people to actually, come and make these swords and stuff like that for her. And there's a little story that goes along with it of how it didn't kind of work out all that well for them. But I just wanted to just mention with the Ishin art, like I said, it's the Kaedehara clan, the Niwa clan, and the Akami clan. Mm-hmm. They were all kind of doing this one type of kind of work and stuff like that. And they're all buddies. Do you want me to go into the downfall of them?
Seems so that's a little bit about them, but here's how they die.
So the Raiden Gokuden was these 5 different schools, right? And then they all sort of went through a decline around the same time.
Yes.
Because a certain someone was out to get them.
Yes. And it's not really their fault. It really is. It's Raiden Shogun's fault. That Scaramouche, the Wanderer, at this time being known as Kanazukishi?
Kuni.
Say it again?
A lot of people just call him Kuni in the fandoms.
Oh, well, that's a lot more easy. That's a lot more easy. That doesn't even fucking...
We're just going to say Kuni.
Yeah. So this time, or Wanderer, whatever you want to call him, Kuni Kazushi at this time, which we're just going to call him Kuni because that's just a lot for my mouth to say. He is pissed at the Raiden Shogun because at this point he has been thrown to the side. He is with the Fatui, so he actually, I guess, is kind of going by the name the Balladeer probably at this point also. But he's goes under this name and kind of works his way in where he kind of I don't even really know exactly how he fucks up the other schools as much as he's kind of oh, look, you people suck and I'm going to tell the Shogun on you, and scares them basically to leaving. It actually tells them to go to Shiznaya at one point.
Well, so he somehow messed up the metalworking plans that they were using to make the whatever sword they were trying to make for the Raiden Shogun. And so that's why they were scared, because all of these swords they made were defective. Yes. Because Skara somehow messed with the actual plans that were drawn up to be used for the making of these swords.
What a bitch.
And everyone's oh shit, she's gonna kill us.
She's gonna rip our heads off.
And I was a little unclear on why he would was he just doing this out of just to fuck with anything having to do with the Raiden Shogun?
Yeah, it felt that way.
Or was it because he thought that Niwa betrayed him?
That's right. Yes. That's got to be it.
Because Niwa was in one of those schools.
Niwa
right?
is a part of the Ishin art along with the Kadeharas.
Yeah, because he was a Kaedehara, but he was, I think, adopted into a different family. Yeah.
Well, Niwa is a part of it, but Kazuha's great-grandfather, Yoshinori, he was a Niwa, and he was adopted into the Kaedehara. Is that exactly what you just said? Did I just repeat?
No, I think I couldn't remember which one of them it was. I just knew there was a Kaedehara who was also like in the Niwa family or whatever.
He's technically a Niwa, and he then was adopted into the Kaedehara family. So, which actually makes Kazuha part Niwa as well.
Mm-hmm.
My head is spinning.
Same.
So Skara was like fooled by Dottore into thinking that Niwa betrayed him.
His foster dad.
Yeah, so he basically played the long game of like fucking with the Niwa clan, I guess. But also like all of the Raiden Gokunin were fair game, I guess.
Well, when you've been scorned and you're thinking of eating arms, like you do whatever you want.
Oh, I forgot about that. Oh god.
It always comes back up, and it always makes me laugh because I'm just like, what the fuck are you talking about?
He really did though. You know for sure Dottore ate those arms. He hesitated and didn't do it. But Dottore,
Yeah.
when the timeline changes, he slathered that shit in barbecue sauce
Yeah, he did.
with like a
Definitely
nice garlic aioli. Like
He
went
put on his
to
bib.
town.
It's like a
He got
lobster
your-
bib.
Al's famous ranch recipe.
I want it so
Don't
bad.
blasphemize. Well, one day you will have it. I just got to figure out the logistics of getting it to you.
I'm gonna send Al so much dry ice.
If any listeners don't know what we're talking about, please go back and listen to our Scaramouche episode where we go into detail about this.
Yes. Also, I thought you were about to mention my ranch. I'm like, I didn't realize we talked about my ranch during that episode. We did.
She's like, I'm still stuck on the ranch.
I'm a Midwest hoe.
And I'm a ranch fanatic, and I really want to try Al's ranch. She raves about it. I want it in my belly.
Who doesn't love ranch?
There are people. It's sad. Those people live sad lives.
They do.
Yeah.
How do you
Sad.
eat carrots and cauliflower and pizza and anything else? You dip into it.
I had an everything ranch dip the other day, and it was so good. But I just wanted to let you know. I'm imagining Dottore dipping some fingers in it now.
I mean, it does say everything in the description, so
No. But yeah, so how start to learn about this swordsmanship stuff with the talking mind stealing sword, which is he's kind of a dick. I wasn't a fan.
The guy stuck in the sword. Well, let's just go back to the case of the eccentric, which is actually what brings down the Raiden Gokunin. If we could just to wrap that part up.
Yeah.
So Skara gets his little wheezy little hands, Cooney, whoever, that dude, gets his little weaselly hands in there, screws up the diagrams. 2 schools are left. The one that we know is going to end up being the one that does everything in Kaedehara within the Ishin art is the other one that's left. And basically, Yoshinori closes down the business to protect on his whole family from Skara, because he's just like, we're not doing this anymore. Nobody's going to make this blade. He knows what happened. Like, he knows exactly what happened to the diagram and why the blade's not working. And he actually technically hides the answer within it. So, he wants to close the business, all this stuff. And his son, he's a great grandfather. So Kazuha's grandfather was like, no, we can't do that. Like, we have to keep it. And he's like, well, if you can make this, then we'll stay open. And he keeps kind of giving the hint of the secret is hidden within. And the dude doesn't pick it up. He's just like not picking up what he's dropping. So he does not make the blade. Doesn't work out. They close up shop and they're kind of like, that's it. We're not going to do this anymore. Just to be able to basically to protect his family, they lose their fortune and they kind of move along at this point. And Skara leaves them alone.
Scar's like, well, I guess I fucked enough shit up there. Dee-dee-dee-dee-doo.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. I know we have like a whole episode on Skara, so I won't say too much, but I just think it's so interesting how he really just became a scorned man. And like, when he finds out everything was really Dottore's fault and he wasn't a scorned man, he like has guilt and stuff. It's just, he's very interesting character. Very interesting.
very spiteful.
I have a theory with your liking of him, because what would be the reason why fiends would love the fact that this evil character has a redemption and has a heart and like kind of comes back and like gets like, hey, I did some shitty thing. That's not cool. I'm a better person now.
The joke is on you because I never said I liked him.
No, I'm saying you like this whole story because
It's Tartagalicious.
it reminds you of child.
No.
Yeah,
Yes,
it runs
it
on the
does.
side of it's the Tartaglia. It's the lines. They all lines. Everything runs together.
I mean, I kind of ship them at times, but that's about it.
You too?
Oh.
You have the most interesting ships.
I don't make them up. I see them. I get exposed to them, and I'm like, You've never seen Scar Child stuff?
No.
I have. It's hot, but like the Skara Kazuha portion is far better.
Oh, but like thinking about their past though, that's like
No, I ship Hu Tao and Kazuha. So sorry.
I
And before that, it was Yoimiya and Kazuha. Those are the only two that I accept.
you know what's a weird ship? Yomiya and Child.
I mean, they had a moment.
They did have a moment where they probably sucked each other off. I'm sorry.
All right.
God.
That escalated quickly.
The answer is Al's horny. So sorry. When am I not? But also, anyway.
So to cool things off a little bit, Tiff,
Yeah.
what happened with this blade?
So there's a hidden piece to the puzzle, basically, within this blade, and nobody has found it. During the Iridori festival, we kind of go down this whole story of the five Kasen, which is a great storyline. And we've talked about the Iridori festival in multiple of our past episodes as well. It just had a lot of good stuff in it. And there's kind of a piece that happens, like a lot of this stuff looks like all of these characters that are happening in this Kasen kind of mimic the lives of the people who are involved with the reading, and Albedo's doing these paintings of them. And they're kind of like, get to this point where they're like, wait a second, like there's got to be something that goes back to my great grandfather. Kazuha was kind of like, And then he kind of like looks at Ayaka because she's there too. And he's like, do you mind if we kind of like talk this out a little bit? And, she's just kind of like, well, everybody hears who are they telling? So they go through their history and stuff, and they realize that there's going to be some clue in the old stuff of the Kaedehara estate that Kujosara has put into a warehouse, respectfully.
Is it the same warehouse that Venti got drunk in?
Yes. I feel like. Wait, no, I thought he got drunk on a ship.
He gets drunk everywhere. He was drunk in the warehouse too.
I think he was drunk on the ship and then was found in a warehouse.
Oh.
Yeah. And I think that they moved the Kaedehara stuff from the warehouse that he gets drunk into another warehouse. Because they repeated a few times, like, hey, sorry, it's a little messy. Like, we just moved all this stuff in here from a different warehouse.
Venti fucking shit up.
Yeah, like Venti like threw up on shit, and they're like, we gotta go move this out. When we go to this warehouse, though, Kujosara has it all set up. The police let us in, and we snoop around through all the stuff. We find some interesting things, and finally we see a bonsai tree, and it's dead because it's in a warehouse and it's old.
It's not been taken care of.
How rude of them to not take care of it. Yeah.
I know. Just like at least water it, fuckers.
Yeah.
Like, why?
They just have the dead bonsai tree. And so Kazuha recognizes this planter, which is actually interesting into a foreshadowing, I guess, when this bonsai tree actually becomes important within one of the summer stories as well. So he recognizes where it used to be, like in their home, and says how important it was, and that after his great-grandfather gave up the art of bladesmithing, he started doing bonsai, and it was like his pride. So they always kept this one bonsai tree, and it had this interesting planter. And then, nobody after 100 years has ever noticed that there's a draw underneath it. But our little team does, and they open it up and they actually find a letter. Like, it basically tells the story. It's his great grandfather being like, hey, we only stopped because of Scar. He did it. There was a piece missing. He could just kind of like throws everybody out. Like, this is everything that happened. And we kind of find out this is where a lot of the end story that we've kind of already gone through kind of all gets revealed to us. And it's all part of a bonsai tree in a cool planter.
And it was so sad. Like, they showed the cutscene, didn't they, of like Skara basically like killing off these people too.
Yeah, it was fucked.
Yeah. So then now he's got a warehouse full of shit though. Like, he's like, rah. And he's like, I like being a wanderer. I don't really want all this stuff. So he asks, after they're done doing their snooping, he asks Kujosara to sell off everything that's in there and give the money to the poor, just in case you didn't like Kazuha and you didn't think he was a good guy. We'll just add in the fact that he sold his his inheritance, to feed the poor.
It's a good dude.
I like that he made Sarah do it too.
Yeah.
I feel like you get that moment where Sarah's like, oh, that it'd be my, like my honor to do that. And then I'm like, he just gave you a job to do. He's like, you got to go through all this shit and put price tags on it. If anybody's done a yard sale, that shit ain't easy.
No.
Imagine
haggling with people.
Imagine Kujosara managing a yard sale and Ito's like switch the stickers on things. And he's like, it says it's $5. It says it's $5. And she's like, I saw you take off the tag. Oh my God, that would be so intense. I would love it. The dynamic of those two. And if I remember correctly too, during the Iridori Festival, we have our whole thing with poor Shingsho, who has terrible penmanship and can't sign all of his books. And our little ragtag group that's investigating also helps Shingsho. And isn't it Kazuha's idea to make the stamp of his signature?
Well, I thought that was Albedo's idea.
I think Albedo made the stamp.
Well, no. Kazuha volunteers to carve the stamps.
Oh, so I have it backwards. Kazuha makes it Albedo's idea.
I don't know whose idea it was. I just know that he volunteered to carve them.
Definitely wasn't Shingsho's idea.
No.
That poor boy was suffering.
We just talked about the fact that they gave him a limp wrist.
He's busy doing other things with it.
Oh, yeah, he is.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he is. Anywho, Talking Blade is another part of the story for Kazuha.
Not to be mixed up with Blade from Star Rail.
Ugh, who would ever?
A lot of people.
Another extremely powerful animo character.
Do they have animo over there?
Kind of.
It's called something else now, right?
It's called The Hunt, right? It's the Hunt, Brandon.
Well, they have the Hunt, but it's also just his element, because you could have different elements.
I get so confused.
Still be the Hunt.
Yeah. So you have like an affiliate basically, and then an element.
Yeah.
Here's the thing, the sword. But basically, when you read the description of the sword, basically it's the whole storyline is to figure out, like, again, the downfall of the Kaedehara clan. But this sword specifically is a sword that basically we find out is one of the descendants of the clan tried to make it to, regain the prosperity and the renown that the Kaedeharas had previously when they were swordsmiths. In order to do that, they decided that they were not going to use steel and that they're not going to use jade, but some other material from the far north, which I think it's from Dragonspine, the material they used, because it is red, like that red ore you get that fires and shit. But when they forged it, they cast a demon inside it.
Right.
Whoops.
An entity of pure malice, which I think they purposely did that because they wanted to make, it was part of like this whole school, the Akame school of swordsmithing. And they were like, we want to make the bloodiest, the fucking lethalest sword ever. And of course, put a demon in it. Fuck yeah.
Right.
Makes sense. Malicious demons in a sword. What else are they gonna do? Kill everything. So basically, it's like, I think the description says something that in the moonlight, the red stone or like the red material of the actual sword looks like blood dripping off it in the moonlight. Yeah. And it's really creepy. It's really fucked up. And the reason I paid attention to it is just because of Inuyasha. And again, we brought it up again. I brought it up again this time. But
not
very
me this
similar,
time.
In the third movie of Inuyasha, there is a similar sword that is a demon-infused sword. And basically, if you touch it, it kind of takes control over you.
Yeah. We first learn about this sword in the game when we run into these like two random samurai guys. And they're like fighting each other, I think. And then we kind of step in. We're like, whoa. And they attack us because, we interrupted. we got what we deserved, I guess. But we beat them. And after winning, they're like, where's Kazuha? Do you know Kazuha? And we're kind of like, oh, you guys so scary. Like, I don't really want to tell you anything about Kazuha. So I'm going to play dumb and say that he's not my friend. And after he leaves, we're kind of freaked out about it. And so we go back to Rito, we find like the crux, and we're like, hey, where the hell is Kazuha? Like, we got to warn him about these samurais. So they tell us that like someone came and found him and brought him to the Tenryou Commission. So we head over there where we see Kazuha talking with the head of the Kujo clan, Kamaji. He's also the guy who's like supposed to get married in Ayato's storyline that we like stopped from
That guy.
happening. Yeah, with the glasses.
I don't like that guy.
He tries to prove himself to like the Raiden Shogun at some point. Anyway, we go there and him and Kazuha are talking, and you can kind of hear him saying something how he wants to do like a charitable act toward Kazuha. And you can kind of tell that Kazuha's not about it. He doesn't want to have the conversation. So when he hears us talk about mysterious samurai, he's like, peace out, I gotta go. Bye. And he joins us.
Peace out, Cub Scout.
So then we go and we ask some people for help. I think we might go to that like detective agency. We learn about people going missing. Like there is a whole thing about it. And that's when we start to learn about this blade that Al was just talking about. And we learn that this blade typically like chooses its own owner, which is weird. And so we go to a bladesmith in town and we ask him about it. And he starts to tell us about how his like nephew disappeared. And then we go try to find the nephew. We get attacked, blah, 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 blah. And we find the sword. And I don't remember if the sword is like with the nephew or with like a different samurai. But we do find the sword. We fight someone holding the sword. And that's when we find out that this sword is wild. And we find out that the person who has the sword is actually being manipulated by it and is being like possessed by it, basically. And then we kind of decide that we have to do something about it. And I think Kazuha ends up being like, I'm going to hold it. And Paimon's like, Kazuha, this sounds really bad. Don't do it. And I'm pretty sure Kazuha like lets himself be possessed by this sword at one point.
Can you imagine evil Kazuha? Like, how terrifying would that be?
They'd kind of be hot.
There's a few times I think that it takes over him. But he wants to learn and know what it is. The prices you gotta pay.
Yeah, and at one point, like, Kazuha lets the sword, like, take over him so that he can basically reforge himself. Because you find out the sword is in, like, a lot of pain. Like, you know, it's a human sword.
Look, it needs blood.
And so Kazuha, like, lets it take over his body, basically, so that he can become normal again. And that's basically the story.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a very brief version of it, but
before that, and we think that, you know, it's every blade has this evil spirit, like you were saying, and I think it was Tataragami was the evilness that was in this blade.
Oh, it's not.
We find out at the end, though, that it's not. It's because the guy who is causing all this and who's stuck in there, he's embarrassed basically that he created this sword that caused all these problems, and it was, you know, going to have all this trouble and stuff. And he tells us his name at the end after Kazuha kind of reforges the blade, and he kind of is just like, you know, my name is Kagatasube Ishin. Kagatasube. That's as close as I'm going to get to it. And that's his actual name. And that kind of like gives, you know, like you hear that a lot in different stories. Getting back your identity kind of like lets you free.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that kind of, you know, really does let the spirit free and kind of, you know, stop being a dick taking over people.
So it wasn't to Tataragami.
No, I think they thought it was. And then there was times when they like suspected that it was, they first suspected, I think, that it actually was. And then they were like, all right, there's other stuff kind of going on. So then I think as they became suspicious of it, because I think there was like remnants of the Tataragami kind of giving off vibes in that area.
Because Tataragami is like the evil energy from Oribashi's corpse, right?
Yes. Yeah. And they thought that it was, I guess I don't know if they actually ever thought it was like Oribashi specifically, or just a piece or somebody who followed Oribashi maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So don't quote me on it.
That's interesting, though.
I know in the end, it was not. It ends up being this dude who was basically just trying to make things right and did not do well with that.
But why was this tied to Kazuha?
Because the sword, people that were trying to make the swords originally were not, they were trying to do the Ishin art.
Oh.
Yeah, so it brought it, but I want to say they weren't a part of the Ishin art originally. They were maybe from one of the other schools.
But they learned the Ishin art, yeah.
Okay, I see.
And that's why Kazuha wants to let the sword take over his body at the 1.2, because he's like, I'm going to learn the Ishin art, which is dead, even though he has no plans of ever doing anything with it.
But I think for that simple act is actually what makes the Kaedehara clan still be recognized as a blade working family in present time.
Right.
Just a little bit. But you get the sword, here's this evil dead sword. We gave it back to somebody else in the story, but you get it as the traveler. There's a few things that it's like, hey, here's this really evil thing. Here, take it. Just put it in your pocket.
It's the one with the eyeball, right?
No, that's the umbrella.
Oh, yeah.
That's from the yokai event.
That's a creepy ass sword.
Yeah, it's the best.
Oh, this is just the red one.
Yeah, this is the one that matches
okay.
his fit.
It looks like Miss Splitter, but red.
So when I did this quest, I literally felt like I was on shrooms or something. And we always joke that Kazuha was high. But this was like such an out of left field event, I felt.
Yeah.
Especially coming off of the Irodori Festival, which was really like very like put together.
Yeah, it does feel random.
Yeah. And it was like, we want to tell you more about them, but we're not really sure. There's too much more to say. We're just going to add this in. Because I feel like that's where we get into the most recent summer event. We start to learn more about his family and the blade work and, the trials and tribulations. I enjoyed a lot about the summer event on the archipelago, or as other people want to say, the archipelago.
No, as you should say
it. Getting to see learning all the stuff about Mona and Fischl and Jinyan. Her story changed my whole thoughts on her, and Kazuha's put me to sleep. And I don't know if it's my lack of interest in sword work that just kind of adds something to me, or I get so confused with the names.
Right.
But you do learn a little bit more about his family back then too.
I loved the fact that you were like, I was falling asleep. So was Kazuha. He was drunk at Angel Share at the start of that quest.
Oh, yeah.
I remember being like, look at this sweet baby angel passed out drunk. And then I remember in the back of my head being like, well, every time you see Venti pass out drunk, you definitely don't think that. I'm like, not this bitch again. But the summer event was super cute, and I felt like it gave us another side of Kazuha. He was forced to talk about his past in front of people that didn't know his past. So, during the Irodori Festival, he had Ayaka there who knew his story, who knew his family. During the sword story quest, at that point, we were presumed to have already known Kazuha's story. Beidou already knows his story, but we're with Jinyan, Fischl, and Mona. And Mona even scries and says that Kazuha is one of the most powerful people. And she's basically like, yeah, we need you as our defender. And then Fischl's like, I, the Presensen, request you to be my knight, or some shit like that.
Mona's like, this guy is OP-AF.
Yeah, she shocks herself even, doesn't she?
I remember her being like, whoa.
And that definitely raised a lot of not red flags, but just flags in my head, because I was like, oh, well, we know Kazuha has been able to activate a second vision before, and numerous people talk about how Kazuha was very unassuming to look at, but even Beidou mentions that the first time she saw him wield a sword, she was shook.
That's why he's giving main character energy,
right? And we've talked a lot in the podcast about characters we think are the strongest in the game, and Kazuha always comes up, and there's just something in the back of my mind because of Mona's scry that makes me say, oh yeah, he's definitely got to be outside of the gods and the special creatures, question mark. I feel like Kazuha has to be one of the strongest.
I think there might be stronger, but definitely the strongest in Inazuma.
I don't know.
I mean, I'm biased because I play him as a main. So I'm always doing, combat with him. But yeah, I definitely think he's one of the most powerful.
Oh, and by powerful too, I mean lore-wise, just so you guys know.
Oh, yeah.
I don't care about the other
Oh,
stuff.
I mean combat-wise and lore-wise. Plus, he has that whole sort of, his fate is sort of tied in with Scaramouche's in an interesting way.
Yes. I think that is so interesting, just knowing that, like, Skara is kind of the whole reason why his family had a downfall. And of course, Kazuha doesn't know that. And Kazuha will never know that because Irminsul was also changed. And that doesn't happen anymore in that way. I think they have it where like the different Blades work groups go like against each other. Yeah. And it's really interesting because Skara actually has a voice line about Kazuha where he says something like, oh, that guy. Oh, he also has an animal vision. Oh, he also stood up against my mother. That's great. I love that. And when Irminsul is first changed and the Traveler is the first person to really notice that, well, because Traveler's the only person who can notice that, the first thing that the Traveler does is go and check on Kazuha. We fly our asses over to Inazuma.
Yeah.
We got there in record time. It took us how long to get to Inazuma on boat?
Yeah.
We have to figure out more about these stupid waypoints, man.
I didn't realize that Goro was so close with him.
Right. Yeah, they're like maybe more than friends at some points.
Yeah, it definitely feels flirty with if you look at their voice lines about each other. And I was like, oh, I did not know this was a thing, but I'm not mad at it.
Yeah, doesn't Kokomi say that they're like always fighting back to back or something like that?
Yeah, she says that he got along very well with Goro. That they would often fight side by side in battle. And Goro's basically says something similar. And he thinks that he and Kazuha make a great team together.
Aww. Well, I guess that bears the question, who is your favorite Kazuha ship and why?
Mine's Hutao, and you're going to tell the story, so I'm going to leave it to you.
Oh, no. Okay.
I don't like it. I don't like the Hutao one.
It's so good. It's so good.
So the reason Tiff and I ship Hutao and Kazuha is because during the most recent TCG event that happened, I think it was the summer of 2023, we like partake in this whole thing where we're walking around with Charlotte from Fontaine and we're helping her report on this person stealing cards, but also like we're checking out the scene. So when we get the leeway for this TCG tournament, we run to Kazuha, who has never played TCG before. He says he wants to learn it, so we bring him to Hutao and blah 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 blah. Hutao and Kazuha immediately hit it off, and there is some high flirting going on. Like, I have never seen flirting like that so hardcore in this game, at least not in a long time. And they're like really hardcore for flirting, and all of a sudden Kaching walks over. And now Kazuha is talking with Kaching, and all you see is Hutao like stalking behind them, like pacing back and forth. And then at one point, she's out of like the freaking frame, and she literally hops up off of the ground and is like, I'm here. Like,
it is hysterical. Like, she's not joking. Like, you see her like almost like it's as if she was tiptoeing in the back, like leaning her ear in, like, hey, what's going on here?
She's like, fucking Kaching, coming to take my man. You already have everything else, Kaching. Let me have this.
It is so funny.
All of Hutao's like jealousy comes out that you didn't know Hutao had. She's like, Kaching, I have a brand new coffin that's made out of oak wood that I think you'd look great in right about now. Besides Hutao, I do love the Hutao ship because of that. I also like Kazuha Yoimiya. I think that they would balance each other out very well. And she's got like that high energy. He's a little calmer. I think he could be high energy in situations and she would be very reassuring, or like, when he wakes up having nightmares, type of thing. This is also assuming that the Kazuha's bi,
Right. I didn't know about the Goro one, but that one's okay. And I kind of I know Heizo is a big one, but I feel like we haven't really seen them hang out really in the game. Have we?
Not really.
Like, I feel like that was sort of teased, but they haven't actually shown it. But I don't love that one, but I also like the Ayaka ship. with him.
Yeah, I like the Ayaka
I
one.
think that one's cool.
I think the Heizo one is born out of like an enemies to lover type of idea, because Heizo was a detective looking for Kazuha when he was like on the run, from my
Right.
understanding.
That makes sense. Yeah, because his voice lines talk about like now that the Vision Hunt decree has been repealed, that he no longer has any grounds to arrest him. But then he's like, but I guess now I can just openly invite him to come to the Tenryo Commission and discuss cases with me.
Yeah, because doesn't he think that Kazuha is like brilliant or so, like basically?
Yeah, it seems like it.
Interesting. And Al?
I mean, outside of Tomo.
Yeah, he's dead, so we can't ship them right now.
Oh, at least not right now.
Yeah, maybe like 5 years ago we could have shipped them.
Yeah, 5 years ago. It's so difficult because most of who I wanted to be with, not necessarily conventional.
All right, who is it?
Is it weird that I kind of want him? How do I explain this? How do I explain this?
I'm like, the suspense is killing me.
You give a name. Give the name.
Ito, really? I really wanted Ito because it was really fucking weird.
What's wrong with that?
Of course it's Ito.
Well, not everyone is, with it, which is fine. But like Ito, like I would just want something funny or like interesting. So I don't like it feels so easy to be like Ayaka.
Mhm.
But then I also am like, he should be dating Toma and Ayato.
He and Goro could be in a throuple with Ito.
That's true.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking at that point. It's like, yes. But yeah, give me some Ito. Just want Ito like, oh, you have poetry? I've got sick rhymes.
I was just like, I just want to see Ito naked. Like, just show me Ito
Yeah.
naked.
I just need Ito to always be a ship.
There's a cute story it's his character story 3 that I think is worthwhile mentioning, because we know that he obviously resonates with the wind. He's an animo vision and all that kind of stuff. And it's actually even what makes him kind of a part of the gang on the Crux, is because he can tell when there's a storm coming or when there's bad weather and all this stuff, because he knows the wind. Like he's his own like weatherman. And his little character story, that's just him being a wanderer, kind of walking around. He runs into a traveling merchant and they kind of just start walking together, and the rain starts, and it's just it's pummeling on them, and they come across a hut. And the merchant is like, thank the heavens, I need to get out of this rain. And Kazuha is like, there's something wrong. He's like, I wouldn't do that. And the merchant's like, what are you talking about? Like, it's like rain, we're going. So he goes up and he knocks on the door, and this like old woman, who I assume is actually an old woman for some reason. I like picture like an old little like lady. She offers him shelter and food and tea for the night. So the merchant's so excited, goes in, has his fill. As soon as he's done eating, he starts feeling very drowsy and he passes out, dead cold.
Oh my god.
He wakes up to the sun blinding him in his eyes and Kazuha standing over him. And he is just in mud. There's no bedding, there's no hut, there's no nothing. And now he's throwing up leaves and mud. And he's just like, I do not know what's going on. This is crazy. Where's the hut? Where's everything? And Kazuha is just laughing, and he's like, I think you need to pay more attention to the wind, because the wind is weaker around homes. And the wind didn't get weaker around the hut. Like it just kind of went through it. So he's like, and therefore I think that you were tricked by so he's like a Kichibushi. Yeah, so I just imagine it is Kichibushi too, because he is a Bake Dunuki. So it was a prank, but like, what kind of fucking prank is that? Like the Bake Dunuki is like, haha, I'm gonna get these guys, it's raining, let me pretend to feed them and shelter them, and then just make them throw up leaves and mud and leave them in the mud the next day. And Kazuha was just like, yeah, you should pay more attention to the wind. It's like, not all of us are a weather vane, Kazuha.
I'm dead.
Very true.
And who would know? So if you're ever wandering around and it starts to rain and the wind doesn't slow down around houses, don't go in. I mean, you most likely you won't have Bake Dunuki. You're going to have like a friggin' like serial killer. But it's going to be the same. It's going to be bad either way.
Well, I think on that note, everyone should be careful of the Tanuki, specifically Kichibushi, because he will convince you to take pictures of him everywhere. And I do think that that's all the time we have for today. Kazuha is a very big character, despite not being a big character. And I'm really hoping we'll get to see more of him in the future. I'm sure most of us are. I hope he wanders into Fontaine sometime soon.
Mm-hmm.
Hell yeah.
That being said, if you liked what you heard today, travelers, please feel free to follow us on Instagram, Tales of Teyvat Pod, or feel free to follow us on Twitter, Tales of Teyvat. If you want to let us know your thoughts on this episode, you can email us at talesoftevatpod@gmail.com. And if you're enjoying this episode and other episodes you've heard, please feel free to rate us on whatever podcasting platform you're using, or YouTube, whatever it might be. It just helps us make sure that as many travelers are hearing this stuff as possible. Next week, we are going to be talking about Kari Bear and his dad, Clothar, which, just so you all know, Clothar has taken over the interactive map, apparently. I have to see it for myself, but we'll go more into that next week. Until then, safe journeys, travelers. We'll see you next time.
Bye, stoner nerds.
Hey.